My name is Clara Whitman, and I'm 25 years old. For most of my life, my parents describe me with the same soft, pitying voice people use when they talk about someone who never quite figured things out, not cruel enough for strangers to notice, not kind enough for me to forget. To my father, I was the child who'd always need help. To my mother, I was sensitive. To my brother Ryan, I was the one who rented because ownership was probably too much pressure, and for years I let them say it. I let them say it while I worked double shifts at the medical billing office downtown, answering calls from people who were scared, angry, exhausted, or all three. I let them say it while I came home after midnight to my studio apartment, kicked off shoes that had gone soft at the heel, and ate cereal over the sink because washing one bowl felt easier than washing a plate. I let them say it while my parents helped Ryan buy his first condo, then his second, then covered part of a renovation he called an investment decision, even though he could barely explain the numbers without looking at my father. And every time someone in the family mentioned how successful Ryan was, my father found a way to glance at me. Not directly, just enough, like my life was the quiet warning label attached to Ryan's success. Last month, Ryan invited everyone over to celebrate his newest house. Not apartment, not condo. House. He said that word like it had weight, like it belonged in his mouth more than anyone else's. My parents arrived early, of course. My mother brought flowers for the entry table. My father brought a bottle of wine that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I knew that because I had seen the same bottle once while standing in a store aisle, calculating whether I could afford both detergent and chicken in the same week. Ryan stood in the living room with his keys looped around one finger. He kept spinning them, not nervously, proudly. The keys made a bright little sound every time they hit each other. Clink, clink, clink. People kept asking for tours. Ryan gave them one every 15 minutes. This is the formal dining room. This will be the office. We're thinking about doing custom shelves here. We might redo the kitchen eventually. My father followed him around like a proud investor. My mother smiled like Ryan had personally restored the family name. I stood near the edge of the kitchen island with a plastic cup of water in my hand, watching condensation slide down the side. I had come straight from work. My shoes were still pinching my toes. My hair was pinned up badly because I had fixed it in the parking lot using my phone camera. Nobody asked if I had eaten. That was normal. Ryan came back into the living room and lifted the keys again. "Still feels unreal," he said. My aunt touched his arm. "You earned it." My father laughed warmly. Some people understand ownership early. The room softened around the joke. A few relatives smiled. Someone chuckled. Then my father looked toward me. "Maybe one day your sister will know the feeling. It was not loud. It did not need to be." That was how my father did it. He never threw a knife. He just placed it gently on the table and waited for me to notice I was bleeding. Ryan grinned, like he wanted to seem embarrassed, but not enough to correct him. "Dad," he said, half laughing. My mother gave me her usual look. The one that meant, "Don't make this awkward." So I didn't. I took a sip of water. The ice had already melted. For a second, I looked around Ryan's new living room, the tall windows, the fresh paint, the expensive couch no one had really sat on yet, the vase my mother had placed in the entryway like a blessing. Everything was clean. Everything was bright. Everything was arranged to say, "This is what success looks like." Then someone knocked on the front door. It was a hard knock, not a neighbor knock. Not the kind of knock people use when they are balancing a gift bag and smiling through the glass. 3 firm hits. The room quieted a little. Ryan frowned. "I'll get it." But before he moved, my father said, "I've got it." I don't know why he said that. Maybe because he was standing closest. Maybe because he liked answering doors in houses he felt responsible for. Maybe because control was just a habit with him. He opened the door. A man stood outside in a dark jacket, holding a flat legal envelope. "Daniel Whitman?" My father's smile stayed on his face for half a second too long. "That's me." The man asked him to sign. My father did. The room had gone quieter now. Not silent, but quieter. The kind of quiet where conversations keep pretending they are still alive. The man handed him the envelope and left. My father shut the door. Ryan tried to laugh it off. "What is that, Dad? You getting sued at my housewarming?" A few people smiled. My father smiled too. He slid one finger under the flap and opened the envelope like he had opened hundreds of envelopes before. Bills, contracts, bank statements, invitations, things that belonged to adults who owned things and handled things and understood things. Then he unfolded the paper, his eyes moved down the page, and stopped. I watched his face change. Not all at once. First his mouth tightened. Then his eyebrows pulled in slightly. Then the color under his skin shifted, like something had drained out of him from the inside. My mother noticed before anyone else. Her hand tightened around her wine glass so hard her knuckles went pale. "Dan?" she asked. He didn't answer. Ryan stepped closer. "What is it?" My father kept staring at the page. The keys in Ryan's hand went quiet. That was the first thing I noticed. No more clinking. No more spinning. No more bright little sound filling the room. Just my father, standing in the entryway of my brother's new house, reading an address he never expected to see in that envelope. And I knew that address. I had known that address before I could spell my own last name. My father folded the paper once, then unfolded it again. Like maybe the words would rearrange themselves if he gave them another chance. They didn't. Addresses don't change because you regret reading them. Before I tell you why that address made my father stop talking, I want you to think about something. Have you ever been treated like the less capable one in your family, while quietly carrying more than anyone knew? If you have, you already understand why silence can sometimes be the only thing holding a person together. Now let me take you back, because people like my parents do not start by taking houses. They start by deciding which child deserves to be believed. The first house that ever felt like mine was not large. It sat at the end of a narrow street with uneven sidewalks and old trees that dropped seed pods all over the curb every spring. The paint on the porch railing had been touched up so many times that you could see the layers if you looked closely. White over cream, cream over pale blue over something darker that had probably been there before I was born. It belonged to my grandmother. Everyone called her Evelyn, but I called her Gran. Gran's house always smelled like coffee, lemon soap, and tomatoes when the windows were open. She had a small garden behind the kitchen where she grew more tomatoes than one person could reasonably eat. In July, she would send me home with paper bags full of them, even when I was too young to carry them without pressing both arms around the bottom. My parents used to complain about it. "What are we supposed to do with all these?" my mother would say. Gran would just look at me and wink. "Eat them," she'd say. That usually works. I loved her house because nobody performed there. At my parents' house, everything had a tone. Every mistake became a lesson. Every opinion had to be softened before I said it. Every dream had to be made smaller so my father wouldn't laugh. At Gran's house, I could sit at the kitchen table and peel the label off a soda bottle without anyone telling me I was being nervous. I could read in the back room while rain hit the windows. I could ask questions without being told I was overthinking. Gran never called me sensitive like it was a diagnosis. She never called me difficult because I remembered things accurately. She never told me I needed too much. She just made toast, put too much butter on it, and asked me what I thought. Not what Ryan thought. Not what my father thought. Me, that was rare enough that I noticed it, even as a child. I didn't understand then that love could feel like being allowed to exist without defending yourself. I just knew I slept better there. And years later, when my father stood in my brother's bright new living room with that legal envelope in his hand, it was Gran's old porch I saw first. Not the paper, not Ryan's keys, not my mother's pale hand around her glass, the porch. The peeling railing, the yellow light by the door. The place where once, when I was maybe 10 years old, Gran had sat beside me and said, "One day, Clara, you'll need a place where no one can vote on your worth." At 10, I thought she was talking about a house. At 25, I knew she had been talking about survival. I think the first time I understood my place in the family was at Ryan's 8th grade graduation. Not because anything terrible happened. That was usually the hard part to explain. It was almost never one big clean moment. It was 100 small ones, a look, a laugh. A sentence said lightly enough that if I reacted, I became the problem. Ryan had won some school award that day. I don't remember what it was called anymore. Something about leadership. Maybe citizenship. He stood on the stage in a blue button-down shirt while my mother cried into a folded tissue like he had just come back from war. My father kept saying, "That boy's going places." He said it to my aunt, then to my uncle. then to a neighbor who had come because her son was graduating too. That boy's going places, Ryan heard it every time. He tried not to smile too much, but he did. He had that look people get when praise has always arrived on schedule. I was 11. I stood beside the folding chairs, holding the little paper program. I had circled my own name earlier because my class choir was listed near the bottom. We had sung 2 songs at the beginning. Nobody had mentioned it. When the ceremony ended, my father clapped Ryan on the shoulder and said, "Practical, confident. That's what I like about you." Then he looked down at me. "You could learn from that, Clara." He smiled when he said it. That smile made it worse. I remember looking at the gym floor. There were black scuff marks everywhere from sneakers, and someone had spilled punch near the refreshment table. My shoes stuck slightly when I shifted my weight. My mother touched my hair and said, "Your father just means Ryan handles pressure well. That was her job in our family." She translated. She took the hard edge off things without ever removing the blade. I nodded because I had already learned that nodding made the moment end faster. Ryan didn't say anything. He was still holding his certificate. My father had framed it with both hands and told him they would put it in the hallway. Mine never made it past the kitchen drawer. Gran came over later that afternoon. She brought a pie in a glass dish with foil over the top. My mother said, "You didn't have to bring anything." Gran said, "I know." Then she looked at me. "Didn't Clara sing today?" The kitchen went quiet for 1 second. Just one. My mother opened a cabinet. "Oh yes, the choir did a nice job, the choir," Gran said. My father was at the table, cutting into the pie before dinner, because he did things like that, and nobody corrected him. "It was a school song, Evelyn," he said, "not Carnegie Hall." He laughed. Ryan laughed too, because Ryan laughed when Dad laughed. Not always because he understood. Sometimes because he knew where safety was. Gran didn't laugh. She pulled out a chair and sat beside me. "What song?" she asked. I told her. She asked me to sing a little of it, and I said no because everyone was there and my face was already hot. So she didn't push. She just said, "Then hum it later when you're helping me wash this dish." That was Gran. She never demanded performance from me. She just left doors open. At home, the rules were different. Ryan's confidence was called leadership. Mine was called attitude. Ryan's forgetfulness was called being busy. Mine was called careless. Ryan could leave a bike in the driveway, and my father would say, "He's got a lot on his mind." I could forget to put a glass in the dishwasher and hear, "This is why you struggle with responsibility." I did not understand how responsibility could be measured in drinking glasses, but I learned to rinse mine quickly. I learned to check rooms before leaving them. I learned to keep my backpack neat. I learned not to mention things I wanted unless I had already found a way to want them quietly. When I was 13, I told my father I wanted to be an architect. I had been drawing houses in the margins of my notebooks for weeks. Not big houses, mostly small ones. Houses with window seats and covered porches. Houses with kitchens where someone could sit and talk while another person cooked. Houses with enough storage so nothing had to be shoved under beds or hidden in closets. My father took the notebook from me and looked at one drawing. "This is cute," he said. That word landed wrong. Cute. Not good. Not interesting. Not maybe cute. Ryan was at the table doing math homework. My father tapped the paper with one finger. "Architecture takes discipline, Clara. Math, deadlines, clients, details. You sure you wouldn't rather do something more flexible?" My mother was chopping onions at the counter. "She's creative," she said gently. I thought she was defending me. Then she added, "Creative people don't always like rigid work." My father handed the notebook back. "There's nothing wrong with knowing your strengths." I looked at the little house I had drawn. It had a porch light by the door. I had shaded it yellow. I closed the notebook. 2 days later, Ryan said he might want to go into business. My father bought him a book about investing. It sat on Ryan's nightstand for months with the bookmark still in chapter 1. Nobody called that cute. At Gran's house, I kept drawing. She saved old envelopes for me because she said the inside of them had good paper. Some had blue patterns, some had gray. I would flatten them under a cookbook, then draw floor plans on the blank sides. Gran would sit across from me with her checkbook, paying bills in careful blue ink. She wrote the date first, then the amount. Then she tore the check out slowly, folded the bill around it, and tucked it into an envelope. I liked watching her do it. There was something calming about the order of it. Electric, water, insurance, taxes. Things that sounded boring, but seemed to hold the house upright in ways I did not yet understand. Once I asked her why she kept every receipt in a shoebox. Because memory is useful, she said. But paper is harder to argue with. I didn't know what she meant. Not really. I just watched her put the receipt in the box, smooth it once with her palm, and slide the lid back on. There was a small desk in her front room that I was not supposed to open. It had 3 drawers. The top 2 stuck when the weather was humid. The bottom one had a brass lock. I noticed it because children notice locked things. One rainy afternoon, while I was coloring at the kitchen table, my father came by to fix something under Gran's sink. I remember because he complained the whole time. "This house is getting old," he said, from under the cabinet. Gran was standing at the stove, stirring soup. "So am I," she said. "I'm serious, Evelyn. At some point, you're going to have to make decisions. I make decisions every day. You know what I mean." The spoon slowed in the pot. I kept coloring, but I stopped breathing the way kids do when adults change their voices. My father came out from under the sink and wiped his hands on a towel. "You should let me help with the paperwork. It would make things easier." Grin turned off the burner. "Easier for who?" He gave a short laugh. "Don't start." I asked a question. His eyes moved toward me, then back to her. "This isn't the time." Gran looked at me too. Her face softened, but only for a second. "Clara," she said, "go get the mail for me." I knew the mailbox was empty because I had checked it when we arrived. But I went anyway. I stood on the porch in the wet air, looking at the street while rain tapped the awning above me. I could hear their voices through the door, low and uneven, not words, just tone. When I came back in, my father was gone. Gran was sitting at the kitchen table with her hands folded. There was a manila folder beside her. Not open, just there. She smiled when she saw me, but it was not her usual smile. "Mail was empty," I said. "I figured." She pulled the soup bowl toward me and changed the subject. I didn't ask about the folder. I wish I could say it was because I understood boundaries. Really, I just understood tension. I knew when adults wanted silence, and I was good at giving it to them. That night, when my mother picked me up, she seemed irritated before I even got in the car. "Your grandmother fills your head with ideas," she said. I buckled my seatbelt. "What ideas?" she sighed. "Just don't let her make you think life is unfair every time someone tells you no." I looked out the window. Gran's porch light was still on. It made a yellow circle on the steps. My mother reversed out of the driveway too quickly, and the light slipped behind us. For a long time, I thought being loved meant not making people uncomfortable. So I got good at being easy. I got good grades, but not too loudly. I helped clean up after dinners. I learned to smile when Ryan got praised. I learned to swallow the little corrections. Stand up straight. Don't mumble. Don't be dramatic. Don't take everything personally. That last one was my mother's favorite. "Clara, don't take everything personally," but it was personal. It was personal when my father called Ryan our future businessman and called me our little dreamer. It was personal when relatives asked Ryan about college and asked me if I was still shy. It was personal when Ryan broke my mother's favorite serving bowl and she said, "Accidents happen." But when I misplaced her measuring spoons, she said, "You never pay attention." Still, Gran never let their version of me become the only one. On Sundays, she would ask me to help with small things around the house. Real things. Not pretend chores. She showed me how to reset the breaker when the back room lost power. She let me hold the flashlight while she tightened a loose cabinet hinge. She taught me where she kept the house documents, though not all of them. "This folder is for warranties," she said once, tapping a green folder. "This one is for taxes." Then her hand moved near the locked drawer and stopped. "And some papers," she said, "are for later." "Later when?" She looked at me for a moment. "When you're old enough not to let someone rush you." I remember that sentence more clearly than I remember birthdays. At the time, I thought she meant my father, because my father rushed everyone. He rushed waiters, cashiers, my mother, me. But Gran's face had gone still in a way that made the whole room feel smaller. That winter, she got sick for the first time. Not the final time. Just enough for everyone to start speaking around her instead of to her. My father came over more often. He brought forms sometimes, envelopes, business cards. A legal pad with notes written in his sharp block handwriting. He would sit at Gran's table like he belonged at the head of it. Gran never moved her chair. One evening, I was in the back room folding blankets when I heard him say, "Evelyn, we need to think practically." Gran answered, "I am. You're making this emotional." "No," she said. "You are making it yours." The house went quiet after that, a heavy kind of quiet. When Dad drove me home later, he tapped his fingers against the steering wheel. "Your grandmother is stubborn," he said. I watched streetlights pass over the windshield. "She knows what she wants." He laughed once, not kindly. "She knows what she thinks she wants." Then he glanced at me. "You get that from her, the dreaming. The sensitivity. It's not always helpful." I said nothing. That was easier. Years later, I would understand that silence can be trained into a person before they know it is training. But back then, I just sat in the passenger seat with my hands folded in my lap, feeling like something important was happening in rooms I kept being sent out of. Gran died when I was 19. By then, Ryan was already being introduced as the one with potential. I was the one people described with softer words: sweet, quiet, sensitive. Still figuring things out. At the small gathering after the funeral, everyone came back to Gran's house. People brought casseroles and foil-covered trays. Someone made coffee too strong. The windows fogged near the kitchen because too many people were breathing in rooms that usually felt calm. I stood near the old table and touched the edge where the varnish had worn thin. My father moved through the house like a manager. He thanked people, took dishes, answered questions. When my aunt asked about the estate, he gave a tired smile and said, "We'll handle it properly." I looked up. Not because of what he said, because of how he said it, we. Not Gran's lawyer, not the executor. Not Clara, just we. And even then, before I knew about the trust, before I knew about the papers, before I knew how far he would go to make someone else's home serve his version of family, something inside me went very still. After Gran died, nobody said out loud that the house felt different. They just stopped going over as much. My mother said it was too hard. Ryan said it smelled old. My father said there was no point sitting around in a place that needed work. I said very little. By then, I had learned that grief made people uncomfortable when it did not look useful. My father liked grief that came with tasks, calls to make, papers to gather, boxes to label, people to thank. He understood grief if it could be managed with a clipboard. Mine was quieter than that. Mine lived in small things. The empty hook by Gran's back door, where her gardening hat used to hang. The last grocery list still stuck to her refrigerator with a tomato magnet. The porch light I kept expecting to see when we drove past, even after nobody was there to turn it on. I was 19 when I signed my first lease. It was for a studio apartment above a dry cleaner on the south side of town. The carpet was thin. The bathroom fan made a clicking sound for 3 minutes after I turned it off. In winter, cold air pushed in around the window frame, no matter how much tape I put over the edges. But it was mine. Or at least it was the first space where nobody could tell me I was standing wrong. I bought a folding table from a thrift store and used it as a desk, dining table, and place to sort bills. I had 2 mugs, 3 plates, 1 good pan, and a mattress I bought from a warehouse sale because the corner had been scuffed during delivery. On the first night, I sat on the floor eating noodles from a pot and listening to the hum of the dry cleaner downstairs. I remember thinking Gran would have laughed at the pot. Then she would have handed me a bowl. My parents came by once. My mother looked around and said, "It's cozy." That was her word when she meant small. My father stood near the window and pressed 2 fingers against the sill. "Renting makes sense for you right now," he said. I nodded. "I know." He glanced at the folding table, the stacked bills, the plastic bin I used for laundry. "Home ownership is a lot of responsibility." I was still young enough then to think maybe he meant it as advice. So I said, "I'd like to own something one day." He laughed, not hard. Just a short breath through his nose. "Let's get you through a full year of rent first." My mother gave him a look, but not the kind that stopped him. "Your father just worries," she said. I looked at my hands. They smelled like dish soap because I had cleaned the apartment twice before they arrived. "I pay on time," I said. Dad smiled like I had missed the point. "That's a start." Ryan moved into his first condo the next year. He was 22. The building had a doorman, polished floors in the lobby, and a small gym he posted about constantly, even though he mostly used it to take mirror pictures. My parents called it a smart first step. My father told everyone Ryan had an eye for investment. Nobody mentioned the down payment. At Sunday dinner, my aunt asked Ryan how he had managed to buy so young. Ryan gave this modest little shrug. Just timing, I guess. I've been trying to think long term. My father lifted his glass. That's what separates people who build from people who just get by. I was at the other end of the table cutting my chicken into pieces, small enough to make it last. I had come straight from my second shift, and my feet were swollen inside my shoes. My mother looked over at me. "You're still in that little apartment, right?" I said yes. "It's close to work," I added, because I felt the need to defend even that. Dad smiled. "That little box works for now, less to maintain." Ryan leaned back in his chair. "Honestly, renting probably suits you. You don't have to worry about repairs or taxes or any of that." He said it like he was being helpful. Maybe he even thought he was. That was the thing about Ryan. He rarely sounded mean at first. He sounded comfortable. Like the world had always explained itself in ways that made him look good. I reached for my water glass. My father said, "Some people need structure before they can handle ownership." No one asked what structure meant. No one asked who had given Ryan his. The first time I heard my parents tell someone they were helping me, I was 21. It was at my cousin's birthday party. I was in the hallway outside the bathroom, waiting because one of the little kids had locked himself in and was crying. From the kitchen, I could hear my mother's voice. "She's doing okay," she said. "We help where we can." Then my aunt said, "That's good. Clara's always been a little fragile." My mother made a soft sound. "Well, she tries." I stood there with my hand on the hallway wall. The paint was cool under my palm. I remember looking down at my shoes. They were the black flats I wore to work, the ones with the insoles I had bought because my heels ached after 10 hours at the desk. That week, I had paid my rent, my electric bill, my phone bill, and a late fee on a medical bill from when I had bronchitis and still went to work because missing hours meant missing groceries. My parents had not paid any of it. They had not offered. But in that kitchen, my mother let someone believe they were carrying me. I could have walked in. I could have corrected her. I could have said, "Actually, I pay for everything myself." But the child in me still knew how quickly correction became disrespect. So I waited until the little boy opened the bathroom door. I handed him a tissue. Then I went back to the party and smiled when my aunt told me I looked tired. After that, I started noticing the story more. It showed up in small places. My father would say, "Clara's still finding her footing." My mother would say, "She likes to do things her own way." Ryan would say, "She's independent, but you know Clara." Nobody ever explained what that meant. They did not have to. By then, the family had learned the shape of me they preferred. Soft. Capable in small doses. Not quite ready for anything big, and Ryan became bigger every year. His condo became a strong investment. Then he bought another one with a college friend. My father called it a partnership. When the friend pulled out 6 months later and Ryan needed money to cover the gap, my parents called it protecting his future. My mother said, "Your brother takes risks because he believes in himself." I was in her kitchen that night, drying dishes. I had stopped by after work because she said she needed help moving some boxes from the garage. Ryan was sitting at the table with my father, looking over papers. There were numbers circled in red ink and a calculator between them. I asked, "Is everything okay?" My father did not look up. "It's handled." Ryan gave me a quick smile. "Just investment stuff." I dried the same plate twice. My mother lowered her voice. "Your brother is building something, Clara." I nodded. The words came out before I could stop them. "I'm trying to build something too." My father finally looked up. His expression was not angry. That might have been easier. It was amused. "With what?" The kitchen went still. Ryan looked down at the papers. My mother said Dan, but softly, always softly. I set the plate in the cabinet. "With my job," I said. "My savings," Dad leaned back. "Clara, you work hard. Nobody's saying you don't. But there's a difference between working hard and understanding assets." Assets. He loved words like that. Assets, equity, leverage, responsibility. Words that sounded neutral until he used them to measure who mattered. I went home that night and opened my laptop at the folding table. My rent was due in 9 days. My checking account had $311 in it. I made a list. Rent, groceries, bus pass, car insurance if I could keep the car running long enough to justify it. I still had my old sedan then. It was silver once, but mostly dull gray by the time I got it. The driver's side window stuck in humid weather. The check engine light came and went, like it had moods. Dad saw it once in the driveway and said, "That car is very Clara." I asked what that meant. He said functional, not impressive. Ryan laughed. I did too, because sometimes laughing with them felt safer than letting them see where it landed. A few months later, a letter came to my studio. It had been forwarded from Gran's old address. The envelope was plain white. My name was printed in a font that looked too official for junk mail. In the corner, there was a county seal. I opened it standing beside the mailboxes downstairs, with the smell of dry cleaning chemicals drifting through the hall. It was about property taxes. Gran's address was printed halfway down the page. My chest tightened so quickly I had to fold the paper, not because I understood it. I didn't. Not fully. But Gran's voice came back to me. Paper is harder to argue with. I took the letter upstairs and tucked it inside an old folder with my lease, pay stubs, and bank statements. Then I sat at the folding table for a long time. The apartment was quiet except for the bathroom fan clicking behind the closed door. I thought about calling my father. I even picked up the phone. Then I remembered him saying, "We'll handle it properly." I put the phone down. 2 weeks later, at a family dinner, my father asked, too casually, "You ever hear anything from your grandmother's old lawyer?" My fork paused halfway to my plate. Mother was pouring iced tea. Ryan was talking to my uncle about a renovation he wanted to do. I said, no, it was not exactly a lie. I had received a county letter, not a lawyer's letter. Still, I felt the words sit strangely in my mouth. Dad watched me for 1 second longer than usual. That was all. Then he went back to cutting his steak, but something in me stayed alert. Later that same dinner, my aunt asked if I thought I would ever buy a home. I don't know why I answered honestly. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I missed Gran. Maybe I wanted one person at that table to imagine me inside a real front door. I'd like to, I said, eventually. Dad laughed. This time, several people heard it. Clara, he said, like I had told a charming joke, let's not get ahead of ourselves. My mother smiled tightly. She means someday. Ryan lifted his glass. Home ownership is stressful anyway, trust me. Renting might be better for your personality. People chuckled. Not everyone, but enough. I looked around the table. My aunt looked down at her napkin. My uncle reached for the salt. My mother stared at me with that same quiet warning in her eyes. Don't make this awkward. So I didn't. I took a sip of water. I swallowed carefully. And I remembered the county letter folded in my apartment folder, waiting under my lease like a small, patient pulse. Then my father wiped his mouth with a napkin and said, almost to himself, at some point, we should really decide what to do with Evelyn's old place. No sense letting family property sit there doing nothing. Family property, he said it easily. Like Gran had not locked drawers, like she had not kept receipts, like she had not looked me in the eye and told me not to let anyone rush me. I kept my face still. But under the table, my hand closed around the edge of my napkin. Because that was the first time I realized my father was not just remembering Gran's house. He was watching it. I did not sleep much after that dinner. I kept seeing my father's face when he said family property, not angry, not grieving, interested. That was the part that stayed with me. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm because the dry cleaner downstairs had started its machines early. The floor had that faint vibration I was used to by then, like the building was humming to itself. I made coffee in the little machine I kept on the counter beside my sink. Then I took the county letter out of my folder again. I read it 3 times, property tax notice, parcel number, mailing address, my name Gran's address. There are moments when a piece of paper feels heavier than it should. This was one of them. It was only 1 page, folded twice, but my hands felt awkward around it. I didn't call my father. I called the number printed at the bottom. A woman at the county office answered. She sounded tired in the way government office workers sound tired, not unkind, just already halfway through a long day. I gave her the parcel number. There was typing. Then she said, "And you're Clara Whitman?" I said yes, more typing. "You're listed as the mailing contact for the trust." I stared at the wall above my folding table. There was a small water stain near the ceiling that I had been meaning to ask my landlord about. "The trust," I asked. She paused. "You'll want to speak with the attorney on file. I can give you the office number." I wrote it down on the back of an old grocery receipt because it was the closest paper I could reach. My hand shook a little, not much, enough. The attorney's office was on the second floor of a brick building downtown, above a pharmacy that still had an old green awning. His name was Martin Bell. I recognized it vaguely from things Gran had said over the years, usually in passing. Martin said this, Martin filed that, Martin knows where the copies are. I had never thought of him as a real person with an office and a receptionist and a framed law degree on the wall. He asked me to come in after work on Thursday. I also said I couldn't because I had a late shift. Then I heard Gran's voice. When you're old enough not to let someone rush you. So I switched shifts with a coworker and lost 4 hours of overtime I needed. That Thursday it rained. Of course it did. I remember sitting in the waiting room with damp shoes and my old folder on my lap. It was the folder with my lease, pay stubs, bank statements, and now the tax notice. The corners were bent, the clasp barely closed. Everyone else in that office looked like they belonged around paperwork. I felt like someone who had wandered in through the wrong door. Mr. Bell came out himself. He was older than I expected, thin glasses, gray hair, sleeves rolled up. He said my name gently, like he had known it before I arrived. Clara, he said. I'm sorry we're meeting this way. I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. His office smelled like paper, coffee, and old wood. There were file boxes stacked along one wall, each labeled in black marker. He offered me water. I said no. Then he gave me a glass anyway and set it near my hand. I should have reached you sooner, he said. Your grandmother had very specific instructions. Some were tied to dates, some to filings, some to when certain notices were issued. I looked at him. I don't understand. He folded his hands on the desk. No. I don't imagine anyone explained it to you. That sentence opened something small and painful in me. Not because it was dramatic, because it was accurate. He pulled a file from his drawer. Not a thin file, a real one. Thick, with tabs and copies, and a paperclip holding several pages together. On the front was Gran's name, Evelyn Whitman. Under it, in smaller type, was the address of her house. I stopped looking at anything else. Your grandmother placed the house in a trust before she died, he said. I heard the words, but they didn't arrange themselves into meaning right away. A trust? Yes, for who? He looked at me carefully. For you. The office got very quiet. Rain tapped against the window behind him, somewhere outside. A bus hissed at the curb. I looked down at my hands. They were still in my lap, folded together like I was waiting to be corrected. Mr. Bell slid the first page toward me. It had my full name on it, Clara May Whitman, beneficiary. The words sat there, clean and typed and impossible to soften, he explained slowly. The house had not passed through the family the way my father seemed to think. Gran had transferred it into a protected trust. The trust gave me rights and responsibilities. It kept my parents from selling it, refinancing it, transferring it, or using it without approval. Your grandmother was very clear, Mr. Bell said. She did not want the property treated as a family asset. I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because 2 nights earlier, my father had called it exactly that. Family property. Mr. Bell opened another folder. She left a letter. He did not hand it to me right away. Maybe he wanted to prepare me. Maybe he had done this enough to know that paper can wound gently before it helps. It's not long, he said. I took it. Gran's handwriting was smaller than I remembered, but still hers. The letters leaned slightly to the right. She had always pressed too hard with her pen. Clara, if you are reading this, I have either become too tired to explain things properly, or I have run out of time. I hope it is not the second one, but life has never asked my permission before moving on. I read that line twice, my throat tightened. I kept going. I know your father believes he is practical. Sometimes practical people are only emotional people who have chosen money as their language. I know your mother wants peace, but peace that costs one person her voice is not peace. I know your brother has been loved loudly, and I know you have been loved quietly. That does not mean you were loved less by me. I put the page down for a second, Mr. Bell looked away toward the window. I appreciated that. Some people stare at your pain because they think witnessing it makes them kind. He gave me privacy without leaving the room. When I could read again, the letter explained the house, not as a prize, not as proof, as shelter. She wrote that one day I might need a place where nobody could decide my value by committee. She wrote that I should not let anyone rush me into signing anything I did not understand. She wrote that If my father became angry, I should call Martin before answering. That part made my stomach go cold, because Gran had known, not guessed. Mr. Bell reviewed the documents with me, the deed, the trust certificate, the tax responsibilities, insurance, an old repair lien that still needed to be cleared, filing fees, maintenance requirements. It was not a fairy tale inheritance. It was a house with problems, a roof that would need attention, a backstep that had to be replaced, property taxes I did not have room for in my budget, insurance that cost more than I expected. Mr. Bell said, "You are not required to move in immediately." I nodded. Can my father do anything with it? Not legally. The word legally did a lot of work in that room. I heard what he did not say. People did things they could not legally do all the time. They just counted on nobody checking. I left his office with copies in a large envelope that did not fit inside my bag. I held it under my coat as I walked to the bus stop in the rain. That night, I sat at my folding table and spread everything out. Lease on one side, pay stubs, bank statements, Gran's letter, trust documents, tax notice. I made a list in a notebook. Call insurance company. Ask about payment plan. Contact roofer for estimate. Check county deadline. Start property folder. I wrote slowly, carefully. Like writing it down made the floor steadier under me. For the next few years, that became my second life. There was the life my family saw. Studio apartment, old car, double shifts, declining invitations because I was tired or broke. And there was the life they did not see. Emails to Mr. Bell, receipts from the hardware store, insurance payments, tax deadlines circled on a wall calendar, a roofer named Luis sending photos of shingles I could not afford to replace yet, me driving to Gran's house after work to check the pipes when the weather dropped below freezing, me sitting on the kitchen floor with a flashlight, waiting for a plumber to call me back, me crying once because the water heater estimate was more than I had in savings, then washing my face and calling to ask about installments. I did not tell my parents, not because I wanted some dramatic reveal one day. I didn't. I wanted quiet. I wanted time. I wanted to fix what I could without turning Gran's house into the next thing my family voted on. So when they joked about my apartment, I let them. When Ryan said renting suited me, I let him. When my mother told relatives I liked doing things the hard way, I smiled and changed the subject. At home, I bought a blue binder from an office supply store. It cost $6.49. I still remember because I hesitated at the register. Inside, I put everything: trust copy, tax receipts, insurance declarations, repair estimates, emails, photos, notes from calls. Every page went into a plastic sleeve. Gran had been right. Paper was harder to argue with. One afternoon, Mr. Bell called while I was on my lunch break. I stepped outside behind the billing office, near the loading dock where delivery trucks idled, and the pavement smelled like hot rubber. His voice was calm but different. "Clara, I want you to be careful if anyone in your family asks you to sign anything related to the estate." I gripped the phone. Did something happen? Not exactly. Someone called my office asking about access to records connected to Evelyn's property. My body went still. Who? They didn't leave a name. But they said they were calling on behalf of the family. The family. I looked across the parking lot at my old car, its dull gray hood catching the afternoon sun. For a moment, all I could hear was the hum of traffic and Gran's voice from years before. "Some papers are for later," Mr. Bell said. "If anything comes to you, don't sign it. Don't explain it. Call me first." I said I would. Then I hung up and stood there for another minute, holding the phone against my chest. Because for the first time, the secret did not feel like shelter. It felt like something with footsteps outside the door. The call from Mr. Bell changed the way I looked at every envelope. For a while, nothing happened. That was almost worse. I went to work. I answered billing calls. I explained payment plans to people who were trying not to cry. I drove to Gran's house twice a week and checked the thermostat, the locks, the basement window, the drip under the kitchen sink. Then I went back to my studio and opened the blue binder. Not every night, but most nights. I would sit at the folding table with my work badge still clipped to my shirt and slide papers into plastic sleeves. Tax receipt, insurance confirmation, email from Mr. Bell, photo of the back step before the repair. Photo after. I made a timeline on notebook paper because I did not know what else to do with fear. Dates helped. Dates did not care how anyone felt. A few weeks after Mr. Bell's warning, my father called while I was eating toast over the sink. Come by tomorrow, he said. Not are you free? Not would you mind? Just come by. I wiped butter from my thumb with a paper towel. For what? A quick family conversation. That phrase sat wrong immediately. What kind of conversation? He exhaled, already annoyed. Clara, it's nothing dramatic. We just need to clean up some estate things. Estate things. I looked across the room at the blue binder on my folding table. My apartment was quiet except for the clicking bathroom fan. What estate things? Paperwork, he said. Simple paperwork, there it was, simple. My father loved that word when he wanted someone else to stop asking questions. I went the next evening after work. I did not bring the binder. I brought a plain notebook and a pen. My mother had made coffee, which meant she expected the conversation to need softening. Ryan was there too, sitting at the kitchen table in a quarter-zip sweater. I knew my mother had bought him because she had asked me once what size he wore. There was a stack of papers near my father's elbow, not thick, just enough to pretend this was casual. Sit, Dad said. I sat. My mother smiled at me like I had already made things tense, just by arriving carefully. This won't take long, she said. My father turned a page toward me. The top had Gran's name on it. Evelyn Whitman. Below that were words like authorization, estate coordination, family representative, property clarification. My eyes moved slowly. I did not understand all of it at first, but I understood enough. There were blank signature lines. One of them had my name typed beneath it. I looked up. What is this? Dad tapped the paper with 2 fingers. It allows me to handle a few administrative issues with your grandmother's house. Handle how? He smiled, but his jaw tightened. Clara, this is exactly why I said we should talk in person. Ryan leaned back. It's just cleanup. Dad's been dealing with this stuff forever. My mother reached for her coffee. Your father knows how these things work. I thought of Mr. Bell's office, the trust certificate. Gran's letter, not legally. I kept my hands in my lap. Can I take copies and review them? My father's face changed very slightly. There were people who would not have noticed. I did. Review them with who? I uncapped my pen and wrote the date in my notebook. I'd like to understand what I'm signing. Mother sighed softly. No one is trying to trick you. I looked at her. I didn't say anyone was. That made the room go still. Ryan gave a short laugh, like he wanted to release pressure from the air. Come on, Clara. You're making it sound like a court case. Dad slid the pages closer. You always do this. You make simple things difficult because you don't understand them. The sentence landed exactly where he aimed it. But this time, it did not move me the way it used to. Maybe because I had spent years being told I didn't understand things, while quietly paying taxes on a house he thought he could manage. I placed my hand on top of the papers. I'm not signing tonight. My mother looked wounded. Not surprised. Wounded. Clara, I'll take copies. Dad leaned back. No, that was the first honest word in the room. I looked at him. If you need my signature, I need copies. His eyes hardened for a second. Then he gathered the papers and tapped them against the table, aligning the edges. We'll revisit it when you're less defensive. I stood up. Ryan muttered. Unbelievable. I pretended not to hear him. On the drive home, I kept both hands on the wheel. My old sedan rattled when I stopped at lights. The heater smelled faintly like dust. At one red light, I realized my jaw hurt because I had been clenching it since my parents' kitchen. When I got home, I wrote everything down. Time, who was present, exact phrases I could remember. Document headings, signature lines, my father refusing copies. Then I called Mr. Bell. He did not sound surprised. That bothered me more than if he had. Did you sign anything? No. Good, I didn't get copies. Describe what you saw. I did. There was silence while he wrote something. Then he said, that does not sound like estate cleanup. I pressed my free hand flat against the folding table. What does it sound like? Authority transfer. Possibly an attempt to create the appearance that your father can act regarding the property. The apartment seemed smaller. The walls closer, but he can't. No, Mr. Bell said. But someone may be trying to make it look like he can. For a few seconds, I heard only the bathroom fan clicking behind me. Then Mr. Bell said, I'm going to check county records again. I want you to forward me anything you receive. And Clara, yes, if they bring it up again, do not explain the trust. Not yet. I swallowed. Why? Because if they don't know what you know, they may show us what they're trying to do. That was the first time I understood. Silence could be more than survival. It could be evidence. The pressure started 2 days later. My mother called first. I was in the grocery store, comparing two brands of rice, because one was 30 cents cheaper, but the bag was smaller. Your father is upset, she said. I closed my eyes. I didn't refuse to help. I asked for copies. You made him feel accused. I asked for copies. He has carried a lot since your grandmother passed. I looked down at my basket. Rice, eggs, store-brand soap. A discounted pack of chicken I had already decided to split into 3 meals. My mother lowered her voice. Your grandmother would hate this. Something in me went cold. She would hate what? Division, suspicion. Family feeling like strangers. I almost said, Gran wrote me a letter telling me to call a lawyer if Dad got angry. Instead, I moved the basket to my other arm. I'm not signing anything I don't understand. There was a pause. Then she said, very softly, you always have to make people prove they love you. I stood between the rice and canned beans while shoppers moved around me. That sentence would have broken me a few years earlier. It still hurt. But I had the blue binder at home. Pain could be filed beside proof now, Ryan texted that night. Dad's just trying to get things organized. You're making this weird. Then another one. Some of us are trying to move forward. I read both messages and took screenshots. I put them in a folder on my phone called Estate. It felt dramatic naming it that I did it anyway. Over the next week, my father sent nothing in writing. That was not an accident, he called. He left voicemails that sounded patient if you did not know him. Clara, we need to resolve this. You're delaying things you don't understand. This affects more than just you. I saved every voicemail. Mr. Bell emailed me 2 days later. Subject line, concerning record activity. I opened it during lunch and felt my stomach drop before I finished the first paragraph. Someone had requested a certified property history for Gran's address. That alone was not illegal. But attached to Mr. Bell's message was a scanned reference from the county system, a loan inquiry. Not a loan, not yet, an inquiry. The property had been listed in a preliminary asset schedule connected to a financing application. I read the line 4 times. Asset schedule, Gran's address, estimated value, family-held property. I had to sit down, the break room around me kept going. A microwave beeped. Someone laughed near the vending machine. A coworker complained about the copier jamming again. I stared at the email until the words blurred. That night, I printed everything at the public library because my printer had stopped working months earlier and I had not replaced it. 10 cents a page. I fed coins into the machine and watched the papers come out warm. At home, I spread them across the folding table. Trust documents on the left. Tax receipts on the right. County email. Loan inquiry screenshots from Ryan, notes from calls. Voicemail dates. I made a timeline in black ink, then I made a second copy in blue. Not because I needed to, because Gran used to write checks in blue ink, and some part of me wanted the page to feel steady. A week later, I gave them one chance to explain. I went to my parents' house after work and asked calmly whether anyone had used Gran's address in a financial application. My father did not blink. What are you talking about? Mother looked at him, then at me. Ryan was not there that time, I said. There's record activity. Dad's voice went flat. You don't understand how these things work. There it was again. That old sentence in a newer room. I said, then explain it. He folded his arms. You're letting people put ideas in your head. My mother moved closer to the counter. Is this Martin Bell? Because lawyers can make simple things seem frightening. I looked at her. Simple things. Always simple until they needed my signature. Dad picked up his phone from the table, as if the conversation had become inconvenient. We'll talk when you're ready to be reasonable. I drove home with the radio off. 2 days later, Ryan announced his newest purchase in the family group chat. Big news. Finally got the house. Closing celebration next Saturday. Everyone has to come. There were heart emojis from my mother, a proud of you from my father, a message from my aunt about how wonderful it was to see hard work pay off. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then another text came through privately from Dad. You will be there. This is important for the family. I looked from the phone to the blue binder sitting on my folding table. The timeline was still open. The loan inquiry was clipped to the top. Gran's house address sat in black print under the words family-held property. And for the first time, Ryan's celebration did not feel like a coincidence. It felt like timing. I went to Ryan's house celebration because not going would have become its own story. That was something I had learned about my family. There was always a story. If I said no, I was bitter. If I asked questions, I was suspicious. If I stayed quiet, I was strange. If I came, at least I could watch. So I put on the one black dress I owned that still fit right, pinned my hair back in my bathroom mirror, and drove there after work with the blue binder locked in the trunk of my old sedan. I almost left it at home, then I didn't. I told myself it was just caution. But when I pulled into Ryan's new driveway and saw all the cars lined along the curb, I understood I had brought it because some part of me already knew the day was not going to stay clean. The house looked exactly like something Ryan would choose: tall windows, fresh landscaping, a front door painted deep navy, two stone planters on each side of the steps, both with flowers that looked too perfect to have lived there longer than a week. Inside, everything smelled like new paint, lemon cleaner, and money. People were laughing in the kitchen. Someone had brought a cheese board arranged like a magazine photo. My mother had placed white flowers in a glass vase by the entryway, and she kept touching them, adjusting stems that did not need adjusting. Ryan saw me first. "Clara," he said, bright and loud, like my arrival was part of the performance. "You made it." I said I would. He hugged me with one arm. In his other hand, he held the keys. Of course he did. They hung from his finger, catching the light every time he moved. My father was standing near the fireplace with my uncle and two men I didn't recognize. He had that relaxed posture he used when he wanted people to see him as successful without him having to say it. When he saw me, he lifted his chin, not a greeting exactly, an acknowledgement. My mother crossed the room and kissed my cheek. "You look tired," she whispered. "I came from work." "I know, honey. I just mean maybe try to enjoy yourself today." There it was. The warning, dressed as concern. I looked past her toward the living room. Ryan was already telling people about the inspection, the closing, the neighborhood, the school district, even though he did not have children. "Come on," he said to a cousin near the stairs. "I'll show you the office." That became the rhythm of the next hour, Ryan giving tours. Guests praising crown molding, my mother refilling glasses, my father accepting congratulations like he had personally built the place brick by brick. I stood near the kitchen island and held a plastic cup of water. The ice melted faster than I drank. Every cheerful detail felt louder than it should have. The bright counters, the untouched sofa, the folded guest towels in the downstairs bathroom, the framed print leaning against the wall, not yet hung, still wearing a price sticker on the back. I kept thinking of Gran's back step, the one I had paid Luis to replace in installments. I kept thinking of the photo in my binder, before, after, receipt, date paid. Ryan walked back into the kitchen and spun the keys once. "Still doesn't feel real," he said. My aunt put a hand over her chest. "You earned it, sweetheart." My father smiled. He always understood how to think long term. Ryan lowered his eyes, pretending to be modest. My mother said, "He worked very hard." I looked down into my cup. A small piece of ice cracked. No one mentioned the financing. No one mentioned my parents covering gaps when Ryan's partnership fell apart. No one mentioned the asset schedule sitting in my trunk, clipped to a timeline under Gran's address. That was how family myths survived, not because everybody believed them, because enough people agreed not to ask. My father came closer then, carrying a glass of wine. "Nice place, isn't it?" "It is. You could learn something from your brother." I turned my eyes to him slowly. He smiled like he had said something harmless. Ryan laughed from across the room. "Dad," but not enough to stop him. Dad lifted his glass slightly toward me. "Some people understand ownership early. Others need more time." A few relatives smiled. One of my cousins looked down at her plate. My mother's eyes found mine from beside the flowers. "Don't." That was all her face said. "Don't make this awkward." I didn't. I took a sip of water. My father kept going softer now, just for me. "This is what happens when people trust the process instead of fighting every little thing." I knew what he meant. The papers, the copies, the questions, the signatures I had refused to give. I set my cup down on the counter. Trust goes both ways. His expression barely moved, but his eyes changed. Before he could answer, Ryan clapped his hands once. "Okay, everybody, backyard next. You have to see the patio." People followed him like he was leading a tour through a museum of himself. I stayed inside. For a minute, I was alone near the entryway, not fully alone. Voices drifted from the back of the house. Laughter came through the open patio door. Someone dropped a fork in the kitchen and laughed about it. but the front room was empty enough that I could hear my own breathing. I looked at the door. I remembered the private text from my father, "You will be there. This is important for the family." I remembered the loan inquiry, family-held property. I remembered Mr. Bell's voice. "If they don't know what you know, they may show us what they're trying to do." And then someone knocked, 3 firm hits. The sound moved through the house in a way conversation did not. It cut cleanly. The laughter outside continued for half a second, then thinned. Ryan stepped in from the patio doorway, someone expecting anyone. My father was already moving. "I've got it," he said it too quickly. Or maybe I only noticed because I was watching him so closely. He opened the door. A man stood on the porch in a dark jacket, holding a flat legal envelope. "Daniel Whitman?" My father's smile stayed in place. "That's me." The man asked him to sign. My father took the pen. I watched his hand. It did not shake. Not then. He signed with the same confidence he used for everything. Big letters, hard pressure. Like even his name expected to be obeyed. The man handed him the envelope and left. For a moment, my father stood with one hand on the doorknob and the envelope in the other. Ryan came closer, keys still looped around his finger. "What is that, Dad?" "Don't tell me you're getting sued at my housewarming." A couple of people laughed. My father laughed too, just enough. Then he opened the envelope. He slid one finger under the flap and pulled out the paper. It was ordinary paper, white, folded. Legal language at the top. I could not read it from where I stood. I did not need to. I watched his eyes move, first line, second, then lower. His mouth tightened. The room was still filling back in from the patio. People had drinks in their hands. Someone stood halfway between the kitchen and living room, unsure whether to keep talking. My mother saw his face before anyone else did. "Dan?" He did not answer. Ryan stopped spinning the keys. That little bright clinking sound disappeared. My father read the page again, then his eyes went to the middle, to the address. I knew the moment he saw it, not because he gasped, not because he stumbled, because he became absolutely still. My father was not a still man. He tapped fingers, checked watches, adjusted cuffs, moved through rooms like they belonged to him. But then he stood there in Ryan's entryway, holding a legal notice with both hands, and did not move at all. Mother stepped forward. "What is it?" He pulled the paper slightly away from her. That told me more than if he had spoken. Ryan frowned. "Dad," my aunt asked quietly, "is everything okay?" Nobody answered. The room had changed. A minute earlier, the house had been proof of Ryan's hard work. Proof of my father's judgment, proof that some children built and others just got by. Now everyone was looking at a piece of paper. My father folded it once, then unfolded it. Like the words might behave differently if he gave them another chance. They didn't. I heard my own voice before I fully decided to use it. "I know that address." Every face turned toward me. My father's eyes lifted. For the first time that day, he looked less irritated than careful. "What did you say?" I kept my hands at my sides. "I said I know that address." Mother's lips parted. Ryan looked from me to Dad. "What address?" my father said. "This is private." His voice was low, controlled, almost normal. But the paper bent slightly where his fingers pressed it. I took one step closer, not enough to seem dramatic, just enough to make sure he heard me. If it's Gran's house, then it concerns me. The silence after that was different. It had shape. My aunt stared at my father. Ryan's face went blank, in the way people's faces go blank when they are trying to calculate what everyone else knows. Mother whispered, "Clara, not here." I looked at her. The envelope came here. Dad's jaw tightened. This is not the time. When would be? No one moved. The house that had felt too bright all afternoon suddenly felt staged. The flowers by the door, the keys in Ryan's hand, the untouched furniture, the congratulations still hanging in the air. My father lowered his voice. "You don't understand what this is." I almost smiled. Not because it was funny. Because even then, even with Gran's address in his hand and his face drained of color, he reached for the same sentence. I said, "I understand enough." Ryan stepped toward him. "Dad, what does it say?" My father looked at him, then at me. For half a second, I saw something pass between them. Not surprise, fear, small but real. My mother reached for the paper again. "Dan, let me see." No, that one word cracked the room wider. My uncle cleared his throat and looked toward the kitchen, like he wanted permission to leave, but did not know from whom. Dad folded the paper again and held it at his side. "This is a misunderstanding." I said nothing. He looked at me hard. A paperwork issue. Still nothing. He stepped closer, and the room seemed to step back without moving. You are going to help us fix this. There it was. Not ask, not explain, not apologize. Going to. My mother's face had gone pale under her makeup. Clara, she said softly, whatever you think this is, please don't turn it into something ugly. Ryan's keys were still in his hand. He had closed his fist around them now. I could see the metal pressing into his palm. Dad leaned in just enough for the words to feel private, even though half the room could still hear. This affects your brother's house, and there it was. The thing none of them had wanted to say out loud. The invisible line between Gran's house and Ryan's. The bridge they had tried to build with paper I was too sensitive to understand. I looked at my father, then at my mother, then at Ryan, standing in the middle of his new living room, surrounded by people who had spent the afternoon calling him self-made. I said quietly, then maybe you should have been more careful with a house that wasn't yours. My mother inhaled sharply. Dad's face hardened. This family does not survive you making accusations in front of everyone. I held his gaze. The envelope arrived in front of everyone. He lowered his voice until it was almost a warning. You are going to help fix this. My mother stepped beside him, her eyes shining now, not with grief exactly, but panic. If you refuse, she said, you will destroy this family, and for the first time in my life, I did not look away. For a few seconds after my mother said that, nobody spoke. Not Ryan, not my father, not the relatives standing in the living room with half-empty glasses and uncomfortable eyes. Destroy this family. I remember the words because they sounded almost practiced. Like my mother had been saving them for the moment when guilt needed to become bigger than truth. My father stepped closer and lowered his voice. Outside, he said. I looked at the legal envelope in his hand. No. His eyes narrowed. Clara, if you want privacy now, you should have handled this privately before it got here. My aunt shifted near the kitchen. My uncle looked at the floor. One of Ryan's friends suddenly became very interested in the patio door. Ryan's face had changed completely. All the brightness was gone. Can everyone just give us a minute, he said. People started moving slowly, not leaving exactly. Just drifting into the kitchen, toward the patio, down the hall. The kind of movement people make when they want distance but also want to hear. My father waited until the room thinned. Then he turned on me. What do you know? I could have answered right there. I could have said everything. The trust, the loan inquiry, the asset schedule, the voicemails, the screenshots, the years of receipts tucked into plastic sleeves. But I thought of Mr. Bell telling me not to explain too early. I thought of Gran's letter. So enough to know you shouldn't have used that address. Ryan ran a hand through his hair. Dad, what is going on? My father didn't answer him. That told me Ryan knew something. But not enough. Mother pressed her fingers against her mouth. This is not the place. I looked at her. Then where? No one answered. So I walked outside. Not away, just to my car. My old sedan looked almost ridiculous parked between newer SUVs and Ryan's fresh landscaping. The evening air was cool. The sky had gone a pale gray blue, and the porch lights along Ryan's street were starting to come on. I opened the trunk. The blue binder was exactly where I had left it. For a moment, I just looked at it. $6.49, plastic sleeves, receipts, dates proof. I carried it back inside against my chest. When I stepped into the living room, my father's eyes went straight to it. What is that? I set the binder on Ryan's kitchen island. It's what you kept saying I didn't understand. Nobody moved. I opened it. The sound of the rings clicking apart was small, but in that room it felt loud. I started with the trust certificate. I turned it so my father could read it, then the deed. Then the page naming me as beneficiary. Then the section that said the property could not be transferred, refinanced, sold, pledged, or otherwise encumbered without proper authority. My father's face stayed hard for the first few pages. Then it changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. His eyes stopped moving, like he was looking for a loophole, and started moving like he had found a wall. Mother whispered, Clara, where did you get those? From Gran's attorney. Dad looked up. You hid this from us? I kept my hand on the page. Gran protected it from you. That was the first time I said it plainly. The room seemed to pull in around the words. My mother's eyes filled. She would never want this. I reached into the front pocket of the binder and took out the copy of Gran's letter. I did not read all of it. I didn't need to. I slid it toward my mother and pointed to one line. Peace that costs one person her voice is not peace. Mother stared at it. Her face crumpled, but not in the way I expected. Not grief, recognition. Like somewhere under all the years of smoothing things over, she knew. Ryan came closer and looked down at the documents. His voice was quieter now. So the house is yours. I looked at him. It always was, legally. He swallowed. Then why didn't you say anything? I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because even then, the question was shaped like blame. Because it was shelter, I said. Not an announcement. Dad picked up the legal notice again. His hand was not steady anymore. The notice was tied to an attempted foreclosure and eviction process connected to a financing default. Grand's address had been listed as supporting collateral in a chain of paperwork it never should have touched. The lender had moved forward, based on representations that my father had authority connected to the property. When the records didn't line up, notices started going out. One of them had found him at Ryan's house, at the perfect time, or maybe just the honest one. Dad said, "This can be corrected." Mr. Bell had told me the same thing but differently. It could be corrected legally, not quietly, not by pretending, not by me signing a false statement after the fact. I turned to the next section of the binder. Tax receipts, insurance declarations, repair invoices, emails, photos of the back step. The water heater payment plan, the lien release, the county email, the asset schedule, the loan inquiry, screenshots, voicemail dates. Every ordinary page sat there saying what I had never been allowed to say loudly. I had been carrying responsibility. They had been carrying a story. My father looked at the timeline. "You documented us. I documented the property. That's the same thing." "No," I said. "That's the problem. You keep thinking everything is yours if you stand close enough to it." Ryan sat down slowly on one of the bar stools. His keys landed on the counter. No clink this time, just a dull metal sound. He rubbed both hands over his face. "Am I going to lose the house?" No one answered quickly. That was answer enough. My mother turned to me. "You can fix this, can't you?" There it was. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What did we do? Can you fix this?" I closed the binder halfway. I'm not signing anything false. I'm not taking on debt. I'm not surrendering the house. And I'm not telling an attorney that you had permission you never had. Dad's face hardened again, but there was less force behind it. "After everything we did for you, that one almost got through, not because it was true. Because part of me had waited my whole life to hear him say something close to that with love in it. But there was no love in it. Only accounting." I looked at him and said, "You didn't make me stable. You made stability harder and then mocked me for needing it." My mother started crying then, quietly at first. Then with one hand over her mouth, like she wanted the room to know she was hurt, but not loud enough to be accused of making a scene. "This family will never be the same," she said. I looked around Ryan's bright kitchen, the flowers, the keys, the legal envelope. My binder opened beside the untouched cheese board. "It wasn't whole," I said, just because I was quiet. That was the end of the conversation, even though people kept talking after. My father called Mr. Bell the next morning. Then another attorney. Then from what I heard later, the lender. There were meetings, letters, certified mail, deadlines. Words like misrepresentation and unauthorized collateral and correction of record. Ryan had to put the house back on the market before he had even finished hanging the office shelves. Some assets were sold. My parents downsized the following spring, not into poverty, not into ruin, just into something smaller than the life they liked people to imagine. For a while, relatives called me. Some wanted the truth, some wanted gossip. Some wanted to apologize without naming what they had believed about me. I did not feed any of it. I only stopped protecting the lie. That was enough. The strangest part was not losing my family the way I had known it. It was realizing how much energy I had spent trying to be understood by people who benefited from misunderstanding me. The night after the main legal meeting, I sat in my car outside my studio and cried so hard I had to roll the windows down. Not because I regretted it, I didn't. I cried because some small, unreasonable part of me had still hoped the truth would make them love me differently. It didn't. Truth did not turn my father soft. It did not make my mother brave. It did not make Ryan suddenly understand what his comfort had cost. It only made things clear. And clarity, I learned, can hurt almost as much as confusion. Months later, when the dust finally settled, I moved into Gran's house. There was no big reveal. No music, no dramatic walk through the door. Just me, two borrowed boxes, one suitcase, and the blue binder riding in the passenger seat. The house was still old. The porch railing needed sanding. The kitchen drawer stuck. The garden had gone wild around the fence. The back room smelled faintly like dust and lemon cleaner because I had scrubbed it twice and still could not make it smell like her. I painted one wall a soft yellow because I remembered the porch light I used to draw in the margins of my notebooks. I kept the kitchen table. The varnish was still worn thin at the edge. One afternoon, while cleaning out a cabinet above the stove, I found a recipe card tucked inside an old cookbook. Tomato soup, Gran's handwriting. On the back, there was one line. For Clara, when the house feels too quiet, quiet is not empty. Sometimes it means no one is arguing with your worth. I sat on the kitchen floor for a long time with that card in my hand. Outside, the garden needed work. Inside, the faucet still dripped if I didn't turn it hard enough. There were bills on the counter and paint cans in the hallway. It was not perfect, but no one was voting. That evening, I sat on the porch while the sky turned dark at the edges. The repaired porch light clicked on above me. A small yellow circle spread across the steps. For years, they called me the child who would always need help. Maybe they were right in one way. I did need help. I needed one person to see me clearly before I knew how to see myself. And she left me a house small enough to repair, but strong enough to protect me. So I sat there in the quiet, listening to the street, settle for the night, inside a home no one could laugh away, sign away, or turn into leverage. A place where no one could vote on my worth anymore.